In this tutorial, we're going to take a quick look at for loops. For loops is one of the two major methods of flow control. The idea of flow control is that without it, our program is just going to run from left to right without any sense of decision making. For loops and branching, which we will look at in another video, are two ways of doing this. So to start, let me just go back into my BP test. There's nothing here right now, so I'm going to create a begin play event. And then I'm going to right click and search for loop. There's a few different types of for loops in Unreal, but what we are really looking for is under flow control for loop. Well, the first one that pops up is under arrays. We don't want that. Let's look at the flow control for loops. This is the basic for loop. This node might look a little different, a little more complicated than other nodes, but it is very simple. The only reason it looks a little complicated is because it has two output execution pins, one called loop body and one called completed. So let's look at how a for loop works. Inside a for loop has something called an index. We can set the index. We can set where the index starts as with this first index, and we can set where our index ends with this last index. On every step of a for loop, it's just going to run whatever code is attached to this loop body. At the very end, the index is going to go up by 1, and the loop is going to run it again. At any point, when the index is equal to whatever our last index value is here, the code is going to stop running, the loop is going to stop running, and instead is going to continue through this completed path. Completed will only run once. So let's take a look at this in action. I'm just going to plug up my for loop and begin play. I'm going to set the first index to 0. In programming, it is normal to start at 0 instead of 1. I'm going to set the last index to 3. And in the loop body, I'm just going to print a string. What do I want to print? Let's print the index to see what it is. And finally, when our loop is completed, I'm just going to pull out this print string, and I'm going to print loop complete. So now if we were just to take a look at this and read it to ourselves, on begin play, we are going to loop from 0 to 3. And the loop body is just going to print out the index. When our loop is finished, it's going to print loop complete. What will the index be? When we start the loop, it's going to start at 0. That's what we set it at. So it's going to print 0. The index is going to be incremented by 1. So the index is now going to be 1. We'll loop back around. We're going to print the index. That's going to be 1. Then it's going to increment, loop back around, print 2. It's going to increment, loop back around, print 3. It's going to increment one more time, loop back around, but at this point, our index is bigger than our last index, so we are going to stop looping, and instead we are going to complete. So what we're going to expect to see is 0, 1, 2, 3, complete. So I can compile this, go back here, and let's just simulate it. And you can see our loop says 0, 1, 2, 3, complete. That was a little hard to see, so real quick, I'm just going to go under my print string and change the duration to something much bigger. Let's just take a look at that one more time. You can see it says 0, 1, 2, 3, loop complete. So this is for loops in Unreal. There are different types of for loops that we're going to look at through the quarter. But this is the basics of for loop. Very useful when we just want to run the same piece of code over and over again. And again, remember, index is a variable here, so we don't just have to type the numbers out here. Instead, we could create an integer variable and use that to set our first or our last index. Why might we want to do this? For example, imagine we are making a multiplayer game where we use a for loop to spawn all the characters. We don't know how many characters are in that particular session, so a variable that holds the current player count is something very useful. So if 3 players are in the game, this would be set to 3. We'd set the last index to 3. Our loop would only run 3 times. If 10 players are in the game, this would be set to 10. That would be our last index. This loop would run 10 times, spawning each one of them. Thank you for watching.